a girl from somewhere else. A few months ago, I was home alone watching TV when I heard the knob on my door jiggle. I muted the TV to make sure I wasn't imagining it, and I heard keys jingling and a woman softly cursing. I figured someone had the wrong house. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door and the woman's voice loudly asking someone named Scott to let her in. Against my better judgment, I opened the door to see this attractive red-headed woman, holding a set of keys in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. She smiled at me and attempted to step past me while muttering something about the lock being broken. I blocked her from coming in and asked her who she was and what the hell she wanted. She asked if I was joking and told me that I was not funny, especially on our 3-year anniversary. As we stood there arguing, I realized this woman really thought I was someone named Scott. I had never seen her before in my life. She eventually started crying, and being the sucker I am, I let her in. Did I mention she was really attractive? Once inside, she stood open-mouthed in an expression of shock as she looked around the room, saying that everything was different, and she really lost it, running around the house throwing stuff, all while loudly accusing me of hiding her things. Being the strong, assertive man I am, I called the cops and got out of her way. By the time the police arrived, she was a crying mess, curled up on my living room floor. She offered no resistance as they took her away. I decided not to press charges since she was obviously not all there. A couple weeks later, I was having a beer at the bar down the street when the crazy redhead sat down next to me. She looked rough, like she hadn't slept in a while, but still pretty hot. She told me that she knew I wasn't Scott, but that she needed some help and didn't have anyone else to turn to. She said she just wanted to talk for a while. I figured there wasn't much she could do to me in a public place, and I rarely have such a hot woman talking to me in a bar, so I bought her a beer and told her I would listen to her story. She told me that the only thing she could figure out is that she's from somewhere else. She said from her perspective, everything shifted on the day she showed up at my house. Now for her, lots of things were different, but not everything. The way money looked was different, as was the U.S. president and the names of most corporations. She'd never heard of Walmart. Most classic rock music was different, and she didn't recognize any new music. But the biggest change for her was that we were not together, after being a couple for 3 years. I felt she completely believed what she was saying. I also thought she was delusional. Everyone has heard about the whole science fiction parallel worlds idea. No one actually claims to have come from one. I asked her what she wanted from me. She said she wasn't sure. While she knew I wasn't her Scott, I was the closest thing she had to him, and being around me made her feel halfway sane. I thought if this was her halfway sane, I didn't really want to see her fall on crazy. I had no intention of taking advantage of a mentally ill person, and I knew I should tell her I could not help her. But looking into her green eyes as she silently sobbed next to me, I knew I couldn't resist. I told her she could stay with me for the night. It ended up being longer. For the first week, I slept on the sofa. I learned more about her. Her name was Rachel, and she was a software developer for a company that didn't exist. She knew things about me, my parents' names, where I went to high school and college, my favorite foods, and that I was allergic to strawberries. She also knew things that were wrong. I never had an older brother named Steven because that was my name. I've also never been to Europe, where she and I supposedly met. Her story never changed and her beliefs never wavered. I can't say if I started to believe her or not, or if I finally decided it just didn't matter. Of course I fell in love with her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and completely in love with me. After a while, being with her began to seem normal. We had this instant connection that people only forge after being together a while. I stopped sleeping on the sofa. The sex was fantastic. I was the happiest I've ever been. Then, one morning, she was gone. She left all the few things she had. and she didn't leave a note. I was devastated, incredibly depressed. As I dealt with my grief, I began to wonder if she was ever really there. From the depths of my mourning, I could not reconcile. From the depths of my mourning, I couldn't reconcile how I could experience something so wonderful and perfect, just to have it disappear. I wandered around in a daze, feeling half alive. Yesterday I saw her. I was at the grocery store when I saw her unmistakable red hair near the produce. Dropping my basket, I ran to her, spun her around and hugged her. She felt so good in my arms and smelled wonderful. I felt her body tense, so I released her and stepped back to look into those beautiful green eyes. She gazed back at me with a look of shock and more than a little fear. "Rachel?" I asked. "Where have you been?" "I'm not Rachel," she said. "Do I know you?"